Our dear Heavenly Father, we once again come before you in spirit and truth, Lord, and we invite your presence now to be with us, the presence of the holy angels and the Holy Spirit. Be with us as we learn and be able to receive the health message that is so crucial as the right arm of the gospel. And I pray and ask that it be a blessing to each and everyone here, and I pray that you'll bless our speaker with the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
Good afternoon.
Oh, happy Sabbath to you as well. I'm always glad to hear that, to be honest with you. As you can see, our subject matter today is a very sweet one. And so we're going to look at that in just a minute. But I started to talk about this morning about strongholds. And we talked a little bit about them. But let me just tell you, I'm a little reluctant to get into this subject after seeing the potluck. Well, let me just give you a story. Some years ago, I was invited to go to a church in Pasadena, California, and to share. When I got there, I had no idea it was a celebration congregation, and they were really doing little rock and roll numbers. And so I got up to speak, and I spoke. I gave the 11 o'clock service, and then in the afternoon I was to do 2 more talks. So I did one on caffeine, which was got taken out of the church on that one. And when I hit sugar, that was it. They never invited me back again. So I hope you invite me back again, even though we're going to talk about sugar. But it is a stronghold. So I just want to briefly go over what is a stronghold. And the stronghold is a fort, as I mentioned this morning. It could be a fort or something fortified. In the military, a stronghold would be a place of defense where soldiers can be safe behind a wall or behind some kind of protection. With us, as we talked about just in brief, is that we find that the strongholds in which Satan builds is the strongholds where he is locked inside. Now, it doesn't mean he's in us, but in some cases that's true. But in other cases, he's getting us from the outside. He builds up these strongholds to be able to destroy us. That's his goal. That's what he does. And he does it through deception and lies. So when you think you might be depressed or you think you might have another one, I have a list that I made up. See if I find it here in my notes of a variety of strongholds. Now, there's probably hundreds of them. But I want to just read this list to you briefly to be able to help you understand that it can be almost anything in your life. I've had people tell me that I don't have strongholds. When I became a Christian, that was all taken from me. That's not true. I mean, it's probably possible, but it's not true in most cases. So with that in mind, let me go through this list that I made. The list is just a few things that we might be able to relate to. One is we might be a stronghold to rejection. Maybe we feel rejected by our brothers and sisters or even our family. And even though it may not be true, many people do, and that's a stronghold. We might feel that our intelligence levels is not as good as someone else's. Well, that's a stronghold, because God has given us all certain intelligence, but He's also given us certain talents, and we all have different talents in our lives today. We all do. And I'm going to get to, eventually, to relate it to foods in a little bit, because they can be a stronghold and tie us to those particular ones. Another would be when maybe we're a people pleaser. We're afraid to tell anybody what we really see in their life. And you know, we need to help each other get into heaven. If there's something wrong with me, I want to know it. I may not be happy at the moment that I hear about it, but yet I want to know it because I too want to be able to work to be able to get rid of the rough edges, because the Lord's going to take a polished stone into heaven. And each of you have the opportunity, as well as myself, to be a polished stone. We might have a stronghold against, let's see, I've already gone through some of these, I'm sorry, bitterness. That's a big one. That's something I deal with, and we, on our programs, we usually, the first day that people went through the program, we had a time when we got into what we call toxic emotions. Toxic emotions are those emotions that actually can create disease in one's life. It's been proven in women that with breast cancer, that if they have a bad marriage or they have a bad relationship with their husband, or they've had relationship problems, they may not be married, it can cause breast cancer. And they call it toxic emotions. I'll give you an example. It can be man or woman. I had one lady, in fact it was the very first program I ever did, when people in Loma Linda found out that we were going to be doing cleanse programs in about 1991, they wanted me to invite them to the first one. I had 34 people go through the first one, almost totally unmanageable. I didn't know any better, but I did recruit some help, and we were able to get through it. But I had one lady go through it. Her sister also accompanied her. She'd had double mastectomy and had cancer spreading through her body. And so her sister, halfway through the program, came to me and says, "Mike, I don't know whether this will help, but my sister has a horrible marriage." I said, "Tell me a little bit about it." She said that when my sister came home with first diagnosis of breast cancer, her husband told her, "Oh, I'm glad. I can't wait for you to die." Can you imagine somebody saying something like that to someone? And I said to her, "And she's still with him?" And she said, "Yes." The whole family has asked her to leave and get out of that toxicity that she's involved in there. He is so negative, and he puts her down constantly. And so, but she wouldn't leave. She did pass away about 5 years later. She lived a whole lot longer than we expected because of the toxins verbally that were being given to her. So these are areas in which are definite strongholds that we need to deal with. But let's just take the time to get into the sugar part of it, and we can maybe through question and answers get into other aspects that you might be interested in. And in fact, when we do question and answers, you can ask on any of the events that we did today. So whether it be toxic emotions, depression, or whatever it may be, you can write your question, and if we have time, we'll answer them all, if we have time. Okay, we're going to talk about sugar. And those of you that go to Colton Church, I'm going to tell you right now, there's no sugar allowed there. None at all. And they have vegan, vegetarian, I don't want to call them potlucks, because luck was a deity. With a little g, little small g deity. So we'll call it fellowship lunch. Oops, I didn't mean to have that. But is it really bad for me? What do you think? Is it really bad or good? Bad? I heard a few bads. Anybody think it was good? Oh, good. Maybe I'm not in trouble after all. Well, let's take a look. Where did it originate? Well, where it came from, prior to 1750 here in America, was not known. It was not until 1751 that the Jesuits introduced sugar to North America. And it came from Haiti, and they brought it into states like Louisiana and others, and they started a brand new industry that would go worldwide. And so by 1791, the sugar industry was in full bloom. And they were started importing it. It was really quite a moneymaker at the beginning, because in England and other parts of Europe, they loved to have the sugar. Well, England, being enterprising at the time and having a lot of African nations, went into Kenya. And if you go to Kenya today, you'll find thousands of acres of sugarcane there. And they're able to provide and produce enough for most of Europe. Sugar consumption began to notably increase in 1900. And prior to that, there was very little sugar really used, just on special occasions in people's homes. Since that time, health has deteriorated, and we're going to get into some of the diseases that can come about with sugar. Now, I just say this about myself. I have been a sugarholic in my past, and due to my wife, we don't have sugar. Now, that was a little hard for me at first, but I've gotten used to it, and my body has adjusted quite well. And I have to admit, I do feel a lot better and a lot more energy without it. So, what is wrong with sugar, cane, or beet sugar? Nothing when unrefined. In Kenya, in Nairobi, I've been there a couple of times. We did some missionary work in Kenya. I went with another brother by the name of Doug Von Kriegelstein. I don't know whether you ever heard of him or not. But Doug has an African ministry even to today. And we went together. And there was a lady from France, Julie Satra, if I'm pronouncing her name right, had heresy going into the Adventist churches. And we went there to counteract that, which we did. And we were thankful. The Lord opened a lot of doors. But we found all the sugar cane. The people were hungry, but thousands of acres of sugar cane itself. And so, but what they would do is the Africans, they would take the raw sugar cane and they would chew it. They did not have dental problems like we have in this country. And you would know it because when they're through, it went on the ground and you'd have to walk on sometimes inches of chewed up sugar cane. And so it's really a nutritious food, 64 elements in it, nutritional elements. There it is. It has minerals, vitamins, enzymes, essential amino acids, and essential and non-essential fatty acids. There's a lot of food value in that. But when they refine it, they certainly destroy it. So unrefined sugar is a nutritious food. Does the body actually need sugar? What do you think? I hear a lot of no's. Oh, I heard a couple of yeses. It's kind of a trick question because it does need it. It's fuel for the body. And we convert carbohydrates, proteins, if we don't have carbohydrates in our system. And we also convert fats into glucose in the body itself. Glucose is very important because that's what keeps us going and gives us energy. Now the glucose helps feed the cells. Our energy levels come from the cells themselves in the form of what's called adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate is made by the cell, ATP it's called, and oftentimes with soy and other things that we discussed earlier, it hinders the production of ATP. Well, sugar will do the same thing, granulated sugar. It hinders the production. And the body recognizes sugar as glucose, and it quits making it as the pancreas becomes confused, so to speak, is the best way to describe it. And then we end up with blood sugar problems, and we'll get into more of that in a minute. The body converts it to glucose. Okay, what food is best? Complex carbohydrates. I didn't mean to go that fast on it. Complex carbohydrates. We're told in the spirit of prophecy that we should eat foods as natural as we can. And I believe that. And the carbohydrates would be whole grains, fresh fruits and vegetables, and then nuts. You can see the almonds up there on the, I think it's on the right side of the screen. And so these are things in which we should eat and get away from the sugar itself. I know it's hard because it was hard for me, but I learned. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that if it is impossible to get away from a food that you know is not good for you, doesn't that become an idol?
Amen.
So it becomes an idol. We should be able to push it aside. And I myself have had several problems over the time I've been an Adventist, but it took me, when I got to the place where I ate as pure as I could, my health really sprang back. It was never real bad, but it was beginning to go south, and I wanted it to stay neutral. Okay, refined sugar. It destroys nutritional value. Studies have been done, and they have found that it's going to sound gross, but sugar, as it goes out of the body, is more nutritious than when it came in.
Gross.
I know it's gross, and I'm sorry, but that's true. It'll deplete your B vitamins. It'll absorb those B vitamins, and when it goes out, there goes your B vitamins. Now, if you're going to eat sugar, you better supplement with a lot of B vitamin. It removes the nutrients, as I've already mentioned, and the insulin spikes. I think we've all can probably relate to the time when we had a big sugar meal, and that we all of a sudden we're hyper, we're high and from sugar, and then when it comes crashing down, we go into depression. And so that's an indicator right there. I want to give you a couple of examples. My daughters, I had two of my adult daughters that met me for lunch at a little place in Redlands, California, where they had veggie burgers. That's before I knew about soy. So we were hurting ourselves with the soy and didn't even know it. So we went into the restaurant and we ordered and we sat down, and pretty soon a mother with two children came in. They were well-behaved, a little boy and a little girl, and they minded their mother quite well. Then, when she ordered the food, she got them both a large soda pop of some kind. I told my daughters, watch them. They're going to change for our very eyes. And sure enough, within about 10 minutes, they were bouncing all over the wall. My mom could no longer control them. And she never figured out what it was, because she told them, if you will settle down and sit down, I'll buy you ice cream afterwards. It may be funny, but it's sad. We probably all have done that very thing and not knowing. And this mom obviously looked like she was a pretty good mom, but she didn't know. And she didn't know. And so it's so important that we will understand that it is harmful to us, and over a period of time it can cause disease. And it does cause stress throughout the body. It brings about disease, as we've already talked about. Refined sugar causes addictions. What do you think the number one addiction for a newborn is? A baby. It's sugar. They eat baby food, and they put sugar in it. They were supposed to take it out a few years ago, but because Gerber didn't do it, then Beech Nut, they had to leave it in too, because they didn't want to lose market share, because this company wouldn't take the sugar out. So they all have it. But there's another one too. You'll find out what it is in just a minute. It leads to other addictions. And the other one is caffeine. How many parents give their children candy, chocolate, gives them Coca-Cola? I've seen them put Coke or cola drink in a baby bottle. You feel like shaking them and saying, wake up, what are you doing to your child? But again, it's ignorance. The people don't know. But the fact is, it develops addictions, and these addictions can spread to larger addictions as they grow up. We've already set the groundwork for it. This is a stronghold that's being built up against that poor child. And when that child reaches teenage years, or even earlier, it might be involved in some kind of addictive behavior. And so we want to be very careful about that. Sugar consumption by 1821 was 10 pounds for every man, woman, and child. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a great deal, but still, look and see what happened. By 1993, it was 147 pounds for every man, woman, and child. That's a lot. Now, I eat little or none, so somebody's eating more. And some of you probably in the same category. You don't eat that much of it, but it definitely can build. And what it can do to us in our spiritual life, it can hinder it, because it can bring about dementia, maybe not severe dementia, but dementia where our memory is lost, and we'll get to that in a minute. By 2000, it had grown. Between 2000 and today, 2017, it is somewhere around 200 pounds of sugar and artificial sweetener per person per year. So it's kind of stabilized at that now. And there are people beginning to wake up on sugar too. But you can see what it says up there by 1986 to 1996. Sugar intake grew by 20%. This brought about that 20% of teenagers' calories come from sugar. It even gets worse in a minute. The rancid process of fat accounts for 50%. So 70% of the food in which teens eat is either rancid fat or sugar itself. Consumption of fresh fruits are down. Fresh apples are down. Well, that's fresh apple. But apple production's up because we've got to have our apple pies, we've got to have our apple fritters, or apple, or whatever the apple is, turnovers, whatever it may be. And so the apple people, the farmers, are still selling apples. Fresh cabbage is down by 65% over what it was 20 years ago. Fresh potatoes are down by 70%. But wait, in just a minute, you'll see that, well, first of all, we can see the statistic on melons, and then 1/4 of fruits and vegetables are in the form of greasy French fries. That's 1/4, or 25% of all fruits and vegetables produced that we eat here in America is in the form of the greasy French fry. That's a sad thing. Some kids, this is all they get, or hash brown potatoes. It's in the same basic category as far as I'm concerned. What you're looking at is high free radical damage. High free radical damage. What's free radical? Simplicitly, it is an atom, and that, if you remember basic chemistry or science, atoms have electrons that float around them. If it's missing an electron or a damaged electron, it's a free radical. And that free radical, when it comes into the body, can go to any cell of the body. It can be a brain cell, bone cell, it can be any cell. And it enters into it and removes the electrons that it needs to be whole. And that is where oxidative stress comes from. Oxidation takes place and the cell dies. So we're losing cell. And one of the things I do is I do what's called live blood cell analysis. I have a dark field, light field microscope, and I look at people's blood. Just a drop is all we take out of the finger. And you'll be surprised how much free radical damage I see there are oxidative stress that's going on inside people's body. When they see that, they make changes. I used to go to Fresno every 2 months. I stopped that after I sold the ranch. But there, I had people come every 2 months. They pay the fee and have it done because they wanted to see if they improve. And when they have a visual like that, they do improve. In many cases, they start eating better, start exercising, drinking the water, and so on. The basic laws of health. Okay. Sugar in common foods. What's that, Fruit Loops? I never had one in my life, never let my kids have it. I guess I'm braggart. I better be careful. Probably go up before I fall. So anyway, Pepsi Cola. It's the highest of the sodas. It has 1.2 teaspoons per ounce. It's very, very sweet. Most of them are 11 teaspoons per 12-ounce can. But this is going to have about 14 teaspoons per 12-ounce can. Lucky Charms, 2.8 teaspoons per ounce. That's a lot of sugar. And who eats Lucky Charms? Like children. The children eat more of it. Fruit Loops. Fruit Loops are 3.3 teaspoons per ounce. Quaker Instant Oatmeal, cinnamon and spice, 4.3 teaspoons per ounce. That's a lot of sugar. I never guessed it would be that much. That must be instant oatmeal, which it says there. And it can bring about a lot of disease in people's lives. Now, Heinz custard pudding, baby food, 4 teaspoons per jar. It's not per ounce, it'd be per jar. And that's still a lot of sugar for the baby. Okay, 12-ounce soda pop, an average of 11 teaspoons, as I mentioned already. Hot cocoa mix, 82% sugar. Now that shouldn't be surprising, but there's a lot of sugar in cocoa mix. You know, you may not like it as much, but if you like hot drinks, give in to using carob and maybe a little honey. My wife makes a hot drink almost every day, and we use primarily honey to sweeten it. And we use raw honey. You're going to find out in a minute, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. And that is, raw honey is excellent for the body itself. Processed honey is not. So if you go to a grocery store and they have processed honey, which most all of them are, they might even say raw honey or natural honey. In the grocery store it usually isn't. It's usually been filtered, and they have to have heat to filter it. I know when I was going to college years ago, I worked for a beekeeper one summer. Worst job I ever had. What happened, the first time, I'll just tell you this part of it. The first day I worked there, I put the headgear on. I didn't get it on right, and I didn't know that. Bees got up underneath that. Now this is metal, this is like a screen. How do you kill them? I ended up in bed. I got stung in my face so many times. But I learned the hard way. But anyway, the raw honey is very helpful, and particularly if you have allergies, because if you eat raw honey in the area in which you live, it helps the body to build up a natural immunity to whatever you may be allergic to. Coffee mate, and I'm surprised there's that much sugar in it. I never thought there would be that much, but there's a lot. There's 65%. Shake and bake, barbecue, 51% sugar. Cool Whip, 21%. I would have thought it'd been more than that one. Heinz ketchup, 30%. Actually, I got a clicker right here. I don't know why I don't use it. Hamburger Helper. These are, you got to understand, I made these up not for church people, I made them up for the world. They're familiar with these type of foods, and we want them to understand. White bread, and that's only certain ones. There's some that doesn't have any sugar in it, but many of them do. And the ones that we looked at had 3.5 on an average teaspoon per slice. And sweet pickle, what is that? Large, 7.5. And we're almost done with this part. Banana split, 24 teaspoons. I know, I used to like them too. I still would like them, but I won't eat them. Yeah. You know, I put a little chocolate ice cream, a little vanilla. Anyway, hamburger bun, that's 3 teaspoons. There's some hidden sugars. You got to read your label and find out what hidden sugars you have. Sucrose, OSE. If it's got an OSE in the end of it, it's going to be sugar. And you want to be careful with it. These are the ones that are not so good. Dextrose, I'll just put them all up there real quick. Glucose, that's not glucose made by the human body. It's made by man. Lactose, maltose, fructose, honey, corn syrup, particularly high, because corn syrup is the worst of all. You know, because it's all GMO. Most of it's GMO anymore. So what effect does sugar have on the human body? Let me ask a question. Can anybody give me one good reason for sugar? No hands went up. Can I ask another question? Don't throw me out the door. But why do we eat it? Because it tastes good. And that taste can be converted to an idol. I know people that drink 2 liters of soda pop every day or more. What are they doing to their body? They're destroying it. White blood cells are part of your body's defense system, part of your immune system. It's one of the main parts of the immune system. And if you use, I'm going to have to look the green on blue, I can't see it that well. One healthy white blood cell will actually kill 14 pathogens in your bloodstream. When I do live blood cell, I see the various white blood cells there. And then if you have 6 teaspoons of sugar, it's reduced by 25% the killing power. So it's down by 10 invaders instead of 16. 1 12-ounce can of soda, 60% reduced by, and only 5 pathogens are killed. 18 teaspoons reduced by 85%, kills only 2. 24 reduces by 92%, only 1 invader is killed. Is it any wonder that America spends more money on health care than any other nation in the world? In fact, you can take half the world's population and add it up, and America would still be spending more, but yet America's sick. We're living in a sick society. There's probably not a person in here that doesn't know somebody that has cancer, heart disease, diabetes, or something major. When I was a boy, it was not unheard of in many ways. I never heard the name of diabetes until I was in my late teens or early 20s. There just weren't many people that had it in those days. But the sugar content has gone up, up, up. And as it goes, so is the health. So more than 24 teaspoons wipes out the body's white blood cell defense for 12 hours. Now, I've known people that get up in the morning and they eat something sweet. They go to work, and at work might have a break and they eat something sweet. Then at lunch hour they go to McDonald's and get a soda pop. In the afternoon they may have something savory. And then they go home and eat something sweet again. This is wiping out a good portion of your defense system, your immune system, for 24 hours. If you're going to eat something sweet, make it once a day, and try to limit that as well, or don't do it at all. Disease that are caused and aggravated by sugar, let's look at them. The suppressed immune system, what's what we talked about first of all, and then it affects the cardiovascular, because hardening of the arteries is more than just cholesterol in the blood. Other things like sugar will cause it to actually stick to the arteries. And we end up with hardening of the arteries much faster. Arterial sclerosis, similar. It contributes to alcoholism and drug abuse. I worked years ago at Loma Linda. I was marketing director for one of their entities. And we had, at the community hospital, which all Loma Linda owned, we had a substance abuse wing where we could take 24 beds for people that were on drug abuse or alcohol abuse. And what we found, some interesting things about it, is that the people there in that wing, all they craved was sugar. So Loma Linda paid more money for cookies, believe it or not, cases of cookies, because what it does is when you're on some kind of substance abuse, or even sugar, if you abuse it, is the fact that it affects your blood sugar levels. And it can create hypoglycemia. And that's one reason people drink or take drugs, because when their blood sugar goes down, they feel horrible, and they take this alcohol and it brings the blood sugar levels up. So in order to rehabilitate them, we would use, not me personally, but the med center would use the cookies to be able to bring their blood sugar levels up so they're not craving these substances that they're in there to try to get rid of. It's important. At the ranch, my ranch, we had a lot of methamphetamine users, a few cocaine. I had one specific one with crack cocaine, and other substance abuse. I don't know how this happened exactly, but the bishop of the Mormon church in Corona, California, would send all their young people to me. And the church would pay for it. There would be a check from the Mormon church, Church of Latter-day Saints, until we baptized one of the people. That was the end of it. So, but nevertheless, we had really good results with it. It's by cleansing, and by cleansing, we're getting rid of the craving for whatever they may be on. We didn't use sugar. We were able to break them and work on the hypoglycemia by other means. And by bringing that up, we were able to really be successful. We were probably 80% success rate. Now, the head of the mental health department of San Bernardino County, now San Bernardino County is as large as some states, but so they had a branch in Yucca Valley. She came and went through my program twice, and she told me if they could incorporate God's method, she was a Christian, God's method in the county, says we could rehabilitate a lot more people. But they had a place called Panorama Ranch, and some people had to go through it 5 and 6 times before it took. God's methods work, and that's the main thing to know, is that if we have problems, we need to go to God first. And He will either direct us to go someplace or He'll intervene in our life. Okay. Okay, I think this guy had a little bit too much sugar. It shortens lifespan. It can actually do that because it can add to blood sugar problem, hyperglycemia, which is diabetes. And if a person comes up with diabetes, they're probably going to live about 10 years less than what they would have lived had they not been on sugar itself or had sugar diabetes. Now, a lot of people think that diabetes is incurable, that they're going to be on medication for the rest of their life. But I'm here to tell you that we've had people go through type 1 diabetic who was insulin dependent who are off insulin today. And we've had many of them, a type 2 diabetic, that we just put them on diet and within just 2 weeks the type 2 diabetes was gone. It's not hard to deal with. Type 1 is much harder, but yet I'll tell you one particular case. I have one man, I won't mention his name, he was a worker in Central California, farm worker, and he was a foreman on one of the large agricultural farms. And he was sick, and his family would encourage him to go to the doctor, but he would never go. And finally he fell over one day in a coma. They took him to the hospital, and if you're familiar with blood sugar levels, his blood sugar was over 1,000. He went into a diabetic coma and was in it for 3 months. Almost died. And so he came out, and shortly, within a few months after he recovered, he lost almost 40 pounds in the hospital. He was converted to Adventism. So after about 2 or 3 years of being an Adventist, trying to live a healthy life, he came to me, but he was definitely a strong type 1 diabetic. So through prayer and through what we did for diabetics, at the end of it, his meter showed that his blood sugar levels were normal. So he went home normal, not taking insulin any longer. Now that didn't always happen with type 1, but a lot of it had to do with prayer and faith. As we prayed, he prayed, and he had faith that God was going to heal him, and he did. And he did. An enlargement of the liver and kidneys. Well, I think my liver and kidneys are as large as I want them. I don't think I want them any larger. So we definitely don't want that. Skin disease, it can cause psoriasis and other problems of the skin. Blood sugar, well, we kind of talked about it. Hyperglycemia, again, is diabetes, and hypoglycemia is low blood sugar. Hypoglycemia. Okay, this is kind of what sugar can do. It causes obesity. And we have a problem in America with obesity. Over 50% of our population is overweight. And so we get into other statistics and we find that maybe 20-25% are what we call grossly obese. Sugar has a lot to do with it. Not always, it can be other things. Tooth decay, hyperactivity in children. And there's a book that I read some years ago. It's called The Crazy Makers. And it was by a nutritionalist who studied poor diets, primarily sugar, in infants, toddlers, preteens, teenagers, young adults, and older adults. And she had it broken down. She had done a study on it. It was a very interesting book. And in that book, she said that most of the problems with hyperactivity with children today was sugar. They ended up eating sugar for breakfast. The schools oftentimes in the school lunch programs, offered sugar type of treats for lunch. And then there were the machines where the kids could buy candy and other things, with the idea that this could help the school budget. Well, in California, when Arnold Schwarzenegger came in as governor, he changed things there and put in apples and oranges and things of that nature, took all the candy out. Things improved. It was amazing. After he left as governor, the candy came back in. And so we, again, started facing some major problems. Kidney stones. No, it's not a present thing. I've sat with people when they were passing kidney stones, and they were in severe, severe pain. I felt so bad for them, but I really didn't want to trade with them. And so I let them, we helped them get it passed through and tried to make them as comfortable as we could. But I could see how much pain they go through. Urinary infections, sugar can add to it. One of the things we tell people when they have a urinary infection is quit eating sugar. Of course, we get into natural treatments like raw cranberry juice and so on. Okay, hormonal disorder, allergies, gout. Now I had a number of people with allergies, and we talked about hormonal disorders, and I didn't really get into, other than Dr. Knoll's program, and I didn't get into the detail I really would have liked to. I'll come back to that a little bit. But gout, of course, is a form of arthritis, and it usually affects the toe. It can affect the fingers as well. I've seen people that came to my program, with gout, and they couldn't even put a tissue over the top of it. The weight of a Kleenex would cause them excruciating pain. It's that bad. You know what the main cause is? What do you think? Sugar. That's the main cause. And allergies, too. Allergies can be created by too much sugar. And so we want to be careful with the sugar content that we have, that we take in. And if we have allergy, try an experiment. Try going off sugar for a while and see if it doesn't lessen. And it usually does. So I invite you to do that. I'm going to invite you to do something right now. I did this to a group a couple of years ago, and they all shrieked. And they were a group of Adventists, for the most part. And I said, why don't we go on a fast together? And they said, a fast? What's that? I said, you know what it means. And so, anyway, what I suggested is we go on a 40-day fast. That's the reaction I got. But what I'm talking about is 40 days without television, 40 days without cell phone, unless you absolutely have to have it for business, 40 days away from electronics of all kinds, and 40 days of spending your time, instead of in an entertainment center, in the Word of God. Just 40 days. I didn't get one taker. No. Anyway, but it definitely would help with all these disorders. The hormonal disorders, again, I'll just tell you what Dr. Knoll programmed, just in brief. We got into it, and then my time is up. And that is what he recommends is 2 tablespoons of omega-3 essential fatty acid, vegetable source. I heard today at lunch a little negative on flaxseed oil. So I'm going to have to check that out. I didn't know. Okay. Then he recommended green powder. We never got to that, I don't think. what I want to say, a green barley or something of that nature, barley green. And he would recommend a tablespoon a day. His tea, we got into that, and you guys got the formula for that on the screen. And then he recommended minerals. That people would take a mineral supplement, one that's natural, not made out of ground up rock. Do you know you can buy calcium that's made out of ground up rock?
Yes.
In a capsule? It's calcium. But you want it from a plant-based source. And that's basically it. And it takes several months for that to really reverse hormonal imbalance. Excuse me, I'm losing kind of my voice. Barbara, can I have some water? Oh, there's some there.
It's inside the podium.
Oh, inside the podium. Oh, sure enough. Okay. Well, if I'd opened my eyes, I could see, couldn't I? Thank you. Okay. Let's go on. Cancer. How many of you knew that cancer fed on sugar? Not very many of you. But that's cancer's main food is sugar. When I have somebody call me with cancer, part of the cancer treatment program, go off all sugar, including fruit sources. All of it. And then we're going to go fight because it's a war. And we can win that war with God's help. But the sugar has to go. I worked, was an Adventist physician. He'd call me to come in and do live blood cell on some of his patients once in a while. And he was I saw his certificate on the wall from Loma Linda, his degree in medical school. And I said, "Oh, you're an Adventist." He said, "Not anymore." And I said, "Why? What happened?" He said, "A lot of things." He said, "I'm not going to talk about it." But anyway, how many people have lost their way with the Adventist Church itself? And I don't want to run it down, but at the same time, it's no longer teaching the truth. And the health message is definitely a part of that. And can you hear me okay? I know I'm talking a little low back there. I'm having a little difficulty. I guess so. Nobody said anything. Okay. All right. Food cravings. That's another thing. What do we crave? A chocolate bar? Well, maybe that's the case. I used to like Snickers. Anybody like Snickers? I used to crave them. And then they came out with the almond one and said, "Oh, good, it's healthier." Boy, was I deceiving myself. But anyway, I used to crave that. And no longer, I don't have any cravings for that kind of stuff anymore. Okay, chemical rush. And the poor children suffer because they don't know any better, the parents don't know any better, and let them eat tons of junk food. Mental and emotional disorders are a result of it. It can come about with irritability, depression, hyperactivity and fatigue, and other emotional problems as well. Is it any wonder so many teens are committing suicide? Partially because of what they eat. They get to the place of despair and depression. Some of them turn to violence and go get guns and shoot other people in a way to commit suicide. And some of them give up before they're killed. But the fact is oftentimes because of what they eat. And it's definitely a part of what they take as far as medication. Because these antidepressant drugs are dangerous and they can cause homicidal tendencies. Memory loss, and we talked about that this morning. The sugar can cause more memory loss. We got all these factors: soy, sugar, other sources, fighting against our brain cells and killing them off, and we're ending up with memory loss. We can't think anymore. And there's, I think, over 12 million Americans in that category that have Alzheimer's. And I think there's more than that. And definitely. It's either Alzheimer's or mad cow disease, because mad cow has the same symptoms. You probably knew this, but a pathologist will not do an autopsy on someone that was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, because it ruins their equipment if it turns out to be a spongiform type of problem. The sugar is not going to do that any good. It's going to make the memory loss worse. Anxiety, we talked about that, right? Panic attacks, we've already talked about that. Any disease is aggregated by sugar. So please, prayerfully consider giving up sugar. All right, for health and reversal of disease, leave sugar out of the diet. I mean, that's pretty common sense. And your taste and cravings will adjust. Alternative to sugar. Here's some honey. And like I talked about earlier, you want raw honey. You want the honey that comes directly from beekeeping. When I lived in Southern California, I buy my honey through beekeepers. A lot of Adventist beekeepers around, and I get the raw honey. They'd even deliver it to me. And sometimes they even gave it to me. But it's important that if we're going to have something sweet, that we would use the right thing. So, like I said, processed honey is definitely harmful. Molasses. Molasses is high in iron. A lot of people have iron deficiency. It's an anemia that goes on inside the bloodstream. And molasses has lots of iron that will help to build a person, bring them their energy levels up and make them feel good. I use it when somebody has low hemoglobin or red blood cells. I've had people that was down around 7 or 8 or even lower, which is getting low. We put them on molasses and they built it right back up within a short time. And sometimes it's because of internal bleeding, and we got to rule that out as well. Then we have stevia, sucranot. These are things that can be used. Maple syrup, rice syrup, fruit source, not fructose, not high fructose corn syrup. Stay away from that. And you look at your labels, just like we talked about with soy, and you're going to find there's a lot of high fructose corn syrup in your processed foods. That's a GMO. And we know that GMO will destroy the digestive tract if you eat much of it on a consistent basis. Raw cane sugar. Raw cane sugar might be all right. Health is more important than sweet satisfaction. Well, that's the end of that part of the presentation.